the billionaire who returned to Jamaica disguised as a taxi driver. The man who stepped out of the arrival terminal at Norman Manley International Airport looked like he had barely enough money to pay for a taxi. His faded khaki shirt was wrinkled from the long flight. His jeans had been carefully patched at both knees. A weathered brown duffel bag hung from one shoulder, and a battered baseball cap shaded his face. No designer watch. No expensive luggage. No security guards. No private chauffeur waiting at the curb. Just another Jamaican returning home after years abroad. Airport workers barely glanced at him as they hurried past, greeting tourists with bright smiles while ignoring the quiet stranger who blended into the crowd. What none of them knew was that the man carried a bank account worth more than $2 billion. His name was Michael Brown. 25 years earlier, Michael had left Jamaica with only $40 American in his pocket and a promise to his late father. "One day, me son," his father had whispered while lying in a hospital bed. "No matter how far life carries you, never forget where you come from. And never judge a person's heart by what they own." Michael had never forgotten those words. In America, he worked every job imaginable. He cleaned office buildings at night, loaded trucks before sunrise, studied business during lunch breaks, started a tiny delivery company with an old pickup truck that broke down almost every week. People laughed at him. Banks rejected him. Investors called him foolish. Yet Michael refused to quit. Years later, that tiny delivery company became one of the largest logistics businesses in North America. Business magazines called him a genius. Television hosts called him a visionary. Forbes called him one of the richest Caribbean-born entrepreneurs in the world. But there was one thing money had never bought him. His mother had refused every invitation to visit America. His younger brother had stopped answering his calls years ago. His childhood friends only contacted him when they needed loans. And every Christmas, expensive gifts he mailed home disappeared before reaching the people they were meant for. Someone had been stealing. Someone he trusted. Instead of sending lawyers or investigators, Michael made an unusual decision. He would come home. Not as a billionaire. Not as a celebrity. But as an ordinary taxi driver. He wanted one answer. Who still loved Michael Brown when they believed he had nothing? As he adjusted his cap and walked toward the taxi stand, an elderly porter smiled kindly. "Boss," the old man said, "you need a ride?" Michael smiled. "No," he replied softly. "I've come home to drive." The porter laughed, thinking it was a joke. But Michael wasn't joking. Within 48 hours he would rent an old yellow taxi that rattled louder than its engine. Within 1 week, his own family would unknowingly climb into the back seat. And before the month ended, a secret buried for 25 years would change every life in the Brown family forever. The old taxi rolled slowly through the evening traffic. Kingston was alive. Street vendors packed away their fruit stands while the aroma of jerk chicken drifted through the warm air. Reggae music floated from roadside bars, and children laughed as they chased footballs through narrow lanes. In the back seat, Michael's mother gazed silently out the window. Michael adjusted the rearview mirror just enough to see her face. 25 years had etched gentle lines around her eyes, but they were still the same warm brown eyes that had watched him leave Jamaica with nothing more than a suitcase and a dream. He swallowed hard. "Long day, miss?" he asked, disguising his voice with a slightly deeper tone. She smiled politely. "Every day is a long day at my age." Michael chuckled softly. "I suppose that's true." For several minutes they drove in silence. Then she surprised him. "You have children?" Michael hesitated. "No, ma'am." "You should." Her voice carried both wisdom and sadness. "When you get old, children become your greatest blessing." Michael's hands tightened around the steering wheel. "Not always." She looked out the window again. "No, not always." They stopped at a traffic light. An ambulance rushed past with its siren blaring. Michael noticed his mother's hands. They were rough, calloused, the hands of a woman who had worked her entire life. His heart sank. He had sent thousands of US dollars home every month for years. Enough for her never to work again. Enough to buy a comfortable home. Enough to enjoy retirement. So why? Why did her hands still look like those of someone who scrubbed floors for a living? She broke the silence. "My eldest son lives in America." Michael nearly forgot to breathe. "I haven't seen him in 25 years. The light turned green. Cars behind him honked. He eased forward carefully. "He calls?" he asked. "Every Christmas." "He writes?" "Sometimes." "He sends money?" A small smile appeared on her face. "My Michael always remembers me." She paused. "Or at least, That's what I choose to believe. Michael frowned. What do you mean? She sighed. My younger son says business became difficult. He tells me Michael barely manages now. He says there's never enough money. Michael felt as though someone had punched him in the chest. Never enough? Every month he wired more than 15,000 US dollars. Every month. Without fail. His mother continued. Sometimes a small envelope arrives. Sometimes nothing. But I don't complain. I know life overseas is hard. Michael's vision blurred for a second. He blinked away tears before she could notice. Someone had been intercepting every dollar. When they arrived at a modest little house with peeling blue paint, Michael couldn't hide his shock. This couldn't be right. His assistant had purchased a beautiful 4-bedroom home in Kingston nearly 10 years earlier. The deed had been placed in his mother's name. He had personally signed the paperwork. Where was that house? Why was she living here? She searched through a worn handbag for money. How much do I owe you, driver? Michael forced a smile. Don't worry about it. She shook her head. No. My father taught me never to take charity. Michael smiled despite the ache in his heart. So did mine. She finally handed him a few crumpled Jamaican dollar bills. Before stepping out, she looked directly into his eyes. For one brief moment, it seemed as if she recognized him. Instead, she simply smiled. You have kind eyes. They remind me of my son. Then she closed the door. Michael watched until she disappeared inside the tiny house. Only after she was safely indoors did he allow himself to cry. The neighbor, an elderly man watering flowers next door, noticed him. You looking for Miss Gloria? Michael nodded carefully. You know her? The old man laughed. Everybody knows Miss Gloria. She's the nicest woman in the neighborhood. Michael climbed out of the taxi. I haven't seen her in years. The lie came easily. The man leaned against the fence. Poor woman. Michael frowned. Why do you say that? The neighbor shook his head. Her younger son controls everything. What do you mean? He tells everybody she's old and confused. He handles her money. He sold her nice house years ago. Michael froze. Sold it? The neighbor continued. Nice place too. Swimming pool. Big yard. Beautiful mango tree. But next thing we know, they moved here. Michael's stomach tightened. Who bought the house? The man shrugged. Some foreign investor. I hear the son made plenty money. Michael thanked him quietly and returned to the taxi. His mind raced. That house had never belonged to his brother. It belonged to their mother. Legally. How had it been sold? A familiar face. The next morning, Michael parked outside a popular cafe. He was sipping coffee when a sleek black SUV pulled into the parking lot. A sharply dressed man stepped out wearing designer sunglasses and an expensive Italian suit. Gold watch. Luxury shoes. Latest smartphone. Michael recognized him instantly. His younger brother. David Brown. David laughed loudly as he greeted several businessmen. Michael stared in disbelief. His brother had never held a steady job. Yet here he was, driving a luxury vehicle, wearing clothes worth thousands of dollars, living a lifestyle that didn't make sense. Then Michael noticed something else. The license plate on the SUV carried the name of a real estate company. Brown Heritage Properties Ltd. Michael had never heard of it. He watched as David shook hands with a man carrying a thick folder. One sentence drifted across the parking lot. Your mother's signature is already on the documents. Michael's heart stopped. His mother's signature? On what documents? David laughed. She signs whatever I put in front of her. Michael gripped his coffee cup so tightly it cracked in his hand. For the first time since returning home. He wasn't just curious. He was angry. Very angry. But he knew one thing. If he confronted David now, the truth would disappear forever. Instead, he reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a small notebook. On the first page he wrote, Who stole my mother's future? Then beneath it he added one name. David. He had come to Jamaica searching for answers. Now, he had his first suspect. But Michael had no idea that someone else had already recognized him. From across the street, a woman wearing a bakery apron stared at him in disbelief. She whispered to herself, That can't be Michael. Yet the way he smiled, the way he tilted his head, it was exactly the same. She removed her apron and slowly began walking toward the old yellow taxi. The woman crossed the street slowly, never taking her eyes off the old yellow taxi. Michael noticed her in the side mirror. She looked to be in her early 50s. Her curly hair was tied neatly beneath a colorful headscarf, and flour dust still clung to her bakery apron. She carried herself with quiet confidence, the kind earned through years of hard work. She stopped beside the driver's window. "Taxi available?" she asked. Michael smiled. "Yes, Mississippi." "Where to?" She opened the back door, climbed inside, and gave him an address only a few miles away. Neither of them spoke for the first few minutes. Then she asked quietly, "Do people still call you Mikey?" Michael's hands froze on the steering wheel. Very few people knew that nickname. Slowly he looked into the rearview mirror. The woman smiled. "You don't remember me, do you?" He searched her face. There was something familiar about her eyes. Then, suddenly, it came rushing back. "The bakery?" She laughed. "My father owned Campbell's Bakery." Michael's eyes widened. "Angela?" She nodded. "Angela Campbell." For the first time since returning to Jamaica, Michael smiled without pretending. A friend from long ago. Angela had been his closest friend growing up. When Michael's family had no food, Angela's father quietly slipped him warm cocoa bread at the end of the day. When Michael couldn't afford school supplies, Angela shared hers. They had dreamed together beneath the old mango tree behind their primary school. "You always said you'd build something big," Angela said with a grin. "I just didn't expect it to be a billion-dollar company." Michael sighed. "So, you know." She laughed softly. "The whole world knows. I watched your interview on television 3 years ago. I recognized your eyes immediately." Michael adjusted his cap. "I was hoping no one would." Angela leaned forward. "Don't worry. Your secret is safe with me. The truth begins to surface." They stopped outside her small bakery. The sweet smell of fresh raisin bread filled the air. She locked the front door behind them and poured 2 cups of hot chocolate. Michael looked around. The bakery was modest but spotless. Photographs lined one wall. There was one picture of him and Angela as children, standing barefoot outside the old school. He smiled. "I haven't seen this photo in years. I kept it." Angela stirred her drink. "I always believed you'd come back." Michael looked away. "I should have returned sooner." She nodded. "Yes. You should have." There was no anger in her voice. Only honesty. A shocking discovery. Angela reached beneath the counter and removed an old folder. "I've been waiting for the right time to show someone this." Michael frowned. "What is it?" She placed several newspaper clippings on the table. One headline caught his attention immediately. "Local businessman David Brown expands property empire." Another showed David cutting the ribbon at a luxury apartment complex. Another featured him receiving a community leadership award. Michael couldn't believe what he was seeing. "My brother built all this?" Angela shook her head. "No. He stole it." Michael stared silently. She continued. "People talk, Michael. They always have. But nobody could prove anything." The family lawyer. Angela pulled out another document. "This came from my cousin. She worked for attorney Winston Clark." Michael recognized the name immediately. Mr. Clark had been his father's lawyer. His father trusted him completely. Angela slid the paper across the table. Michael's heart pounded. It was a photocopy of a property transfer. The signature at the bottom belonged to his mother. But something was wrong. Very wrong. Michael looked closely. His mother's name was misspelled. One letter was missing. His mother had never signed her name that way. Ever. "It was forged," Michael whispered. Angela nodded. "That's not all." She handed him another page. Bank records. Transfers. Wire payments. Monthly deposits. Every payment Michael had sent from America had entered a trust account. Instead of going to his mother, the money had been redirected. For 25 years. Michael stared at the numbers. Month after month. Year after year. Millions of Jamaican dollars. Gone. The weight of betrayal. Michael leaned back in his chair. His chest felt tight. It wasn't just the house. Angela quietly shook her head. "No. It was everything. Your mother's savings. Your father's land. The money you sent. The investment account." Michael whispered. "All these years. My mother believed I abandoned her." Angela reached across the table. "No. She never believed that." Michael looked up. "What do you mean?" Angela smiled sadly. "Every Christmas she baked your favorite rum cake. Every birthday she bought a little gift. She still keeps your bedroom exactly as you left it." Michael covered his face with his hands. "I failed her." "No." Angela's voice was firm. "Someone else failed both of you. An unexpected ally." The bakery door opened. An elderly man walked inside carrying a leather briefcase. Angela smiled. Perfect timing. Michael. I'd like you to meet retired Detective Samuel Grant. The detective extended his hand. I've been waiting 20 years to meet you. Michael frowned. You know who I am? Samuel nodded. I investigated allegations against your brother years ago. What happened? The case disappeared. Evidence vanished. Witnesses suddenly changed their stories. Michael's eyes narrowed. Someone protected him. Samuel nodded slowly. Someone powerful. He opened his briefcase. Inside were dozens of neatly organized files. Property deeds. Bank statements. Photographs. Witness interviews. Every piece of evidence he gathered before being forced into retirement. Samuel looked Michael directly in the eyes. I couldn't finish the investigation. But you can. Michael flipped through the files. The evidence was overwhelming. David hadn't acted alone. There were signatures from accountants, bank managers, government officials, and one name that appeared again and again. Attorney Winston Clark, the family lawyer. The man Michael's father had trusted with everything. Samuel closed the briefcase. If you're going after them, you'll need to be careful. They don't know you're back. And that's your greatest advantage. Michael stood and looked out the bakery window. Across the street, a black SUV had been parked for nearly 20 minutes. Inside sat a man wearing dark sunglasses. The moment Michael looked his way, the SUV pulled away. Samuel noticed it too. He quietly said, "They're already watching." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. His disguise had protected him so far. But not for much longer. Somewhere in Kingston, David Brown had just been told one simple sentence. He's back. The black SUV disappeared around the corner, but the silence it left behind was louder than its engine. Michael stood at the bakery window watching until it was gone. Retired Detective Samuel Grant closed his briefcase with a snap. They've noticed you, he said quietly. That means we don't have much time. Angela crossed her arms. You can't stay at Miss Ruby's anymore. Michael shook his head. If I disappear now, David will know I'm afraid. Samuel nodded. Then don't disappear. Make him think you're exactly who he believes you are. A poor taxi driver. Michael smiled faintly. I've spent 25 years learning how to negotiate billion-dollar deals. I think I can play the role of a taxi driver a little longer. The detective smiled for the first time. Good. Because tomorrow you're going somewhere no one expects. A journey into the past. The next morning, before sunrise, Michael drove into the hills of St. Catherine. The roads grew narrower with every mile. Soon the city disappeared behind him. Towering bamboo swayed gently in the breeze. Roosters crowed from distant yards. Mist rolled across the hills like a soft blanket. He hadn't been here in 25 years. This was where he had grown up. The old Brown family farm. His father had raised goats, planted yams, and harvested sugar cane on this land. They had never been wealthy, but there had always been enough to share. When Michael parked beside the rusted gate, his heart broke. The farm had been abandoned. The wooden house leaned to one side. The roof had collapsed. The vegetable fields were overgrown with thick vines. The laughter that had once filled the yard had long since faded. He walked slowly toward the front porch. Every step awakened another memory. His mother singing while hanging laundry. His father sharpening a machete. David chasing chickens through the yard. Life had once been simple. The mango tree. Behind the house stood the giant mango tree. It was older now. Its branches stretched wider than Michael remembered. As children, he and David had spent entire summers climbing that tree. One afternoon, their father had buried a small metal box beneath it. I'll tell you boys what's inside when you're both ready, he had said with a smile. But he had died before he ever could. Michael knelt beneath the tree. The detective's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes the truth survives longer than the people who hide it. Using an old shovel leaning against the house, Michael began digging. The earth was hard. Sweat rolled down his face. Nearly 30 minutes passed. The clang. Metal. His heartbeat quickened. He carefully brushed away the dirt. There it was. A rusted steel box. Exactly where his father had buried it. His father's last letter. The lock had long since rusted away. Michael lifted the lid carefully. Inside were several neatly wrapped bundles. Old family photographs. A faded Bible. A gold pocket watch. And one sealed envelope. Across the front, written in his father's familiar handwriting, were the words, "For Michael." His hands trembled as he opened it. The paper had yellowed with age. He began to read. My son, if you are reading this, then God has brought you home. There is something I never found the courage to tell you while I was alive. Michael swallowed hard. You have always believed David and you were raised the same. In love, yes. In blood, no. Michael stared at the page. His breathing stopped. He continued reading. David is not my biological son. When he was 3 years old, his parents died in a terrible accident. Your mother and I adopted him because we believed every child deserves a family. Michael's eyes filled with tears. He had never known. Neither had David. His father had continued. We chose never to tell him because he became our son in every way that mattered. Michael sat quietly beneath the tree. The morning breeze stirred the leaves overhead. Everything he believed about his family had just changed. The rest of the letter. His father had written one final page. Michael, if jealousy ever enters this family, remember this. Love is not divided. It is multiplied. Michael smiled through his tears. That sounded exactly like his father. Then the letter took a darker turn. There is one man I do not trust. Attorney Winston Clark. Michael's expression changed instantly. The letter continued. He has asked me many times to transfer the family land into his company's name. I refused. If anything ever happens to me unexpectedly, investigate him. Michael's heart pounded. His father had known. Not everything, but enough to be suspicious. A witness appears. As Michael folded the letter carefully, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned quickly. An elderly farmer stood near the fence holding a basket of oranges. Morning. Michael smiled politely. Morning. The old man squinted. You look familiar. Michael laughed softly. I get that a lot. The farmer walked closer. Then his eyes widened. Mikey? Michael froze. Mr. Henry? The old farmer laughed so loudly that birds flew from the mango tree. I knew it. He wrapped Michael in a tight embrace. You've come home. Michael hugged him back. I finally did. Mr. Henry stepped back and studied him. Your father would be proud. Then his smile disappeared. You need to leave. Michael frowned. Why? The farmer looked nervously toward the road. David bought most of this land. He doesn't like strangers coming here. Michael's stomach tightened. Bought? Mr. Henry shook his head. That's what everybody says. But your father never wanted this farm sold. Michael looked toward the old house. He didn't. Mr. Henry lowered his voice. I saw something the night before your father died. Michael's heart raced. What? A heated argument. Your father. Attorney Clark. And David. Michael stared in disbelief. My father and David argued? Mr. Henry nodded. For hours. I couldn't hear every word. But I remember one sentence. What was it? The old farmer looked Michael directly in the eyes. Your father shouted. Over my dead body will you steal from this family? Silence filled the farm. Michael's mind raced. His father hadn't simply died after a brief illness. Something had happened before his death. Something no one had ever talked about. Danger arrives. Before Michael could ask another question, the sound of engines echoed across the hills. 2 black SUVs turned onto the dirt road leading toward the farm. Mr. Henry's face turned pale. They're here. Michael looked toward the approaching vehicles. One SUV stopped near the gate. The driver's door opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out. He removed his sunglasses. Even from a distance, Michael recognized him immediately. David. His younger brother. David looked across the field directly at the old mango tree. Then he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a loving brother. It was the smile of a man who believed he'd cornered his enemy. Michael slipped his father's letter inside his shirt. There was no more hiding. Not anymore. The truth buried beneath the mango tree had changed everything. And for the first time in 25 years, the 2 brothers stood face to face. The wind swept across the abandoned farm as the 2 black SUVs came to a stop. Dust swirled around the old mango tree. David Brown stepped out first. His polished shoes looked strangely out of place on the cracked earth where he had once run barefoot as a little boy. Behind him came 3 large security guards. One wore an earpiece. Another carried a leather folder. The third scanned the property with cold, suspicious eyes. David adjusted the cuff of his expensive jacket and looked directly at Michael. You've been asking too many questions. Michael lowered the brim of his baseball cap. I'm just a taxi driver. David laughed. No. You're something else. He walked slowly toward the tree. I've seen you outside my office. I've seen you near my mother's house. And now you're digging on my property. Michael's jaw tightened. Your property? David smiled confidently. I have the deeds. Michael looked toward the old farmhouse. My father would disagree. David's expression darkened. Your father? What do you know about him? Michael took a slow breath. Enough to know he never wanted this land sold. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across David's face. It lasted only a second. Then it disappeared. You've been listening to old men who don't know when to stop talking. David turned to his guards. Search him. The chase through the hills. The guards moved forward. Michael knew he couldn't fight 3 men. Instead, he did something none of them expected. He ran. Straight into the overgrown sugar cane fields. Stop him. David shouted. The guards crashed through the tall cane, but Michael knew these hills better than anyone. As a boy, he had climbed every rock, crossed every stream, and hidden in every cave. He ducked beneath low branches, crossed a narrow footbridge, and disappeared into a thick bamboo grove. One guard slipped in the mud. Another lost his shoe. The third gave up, breathing heavily. David stood at the edge of the field, furious. Find him. But Michael was already gone. A safe place. An hour later, Michael arrived at Detective Samuel Grant's small home on the outskirts of Kingston. Angela was already there. She looked up the moment he entered. What happened? Michael placed the rusted metal box on the table. I found my father's letter. Samuel leaned forward. And? Michael handed it to him. The detective read every word carefully. When he reached the final page, he removed his glasses and rubbed his forehead. This changes everything. Angela frowned. What is it? Samuel looked at both of them. If your father suspected Winston Clark before he died, then this wasn't just about money. Michael nodded. I've been thinking the same thing. Without saying another word, Samuel disappeared into a back room. He returned carrying another old box labeled Brown Case, Confidential. This is everything I wasn't allowed to keep, he said. There was one file that never made sense. He carefully opened a faded manila folder. Inside was a copy of Michael's father's medical report. Samuel pointed to one sentence highlighted in yellow. Cause of death, heart failure. So? Michael asked. Samuel turned another page. The problem is, he never had heart disease. Michael looked confused. What are you saying? Samuel placed another report beside it. This one came from the local clinic only 6 months before his father's death. Excellent blood pressure. Healthy heart. No chronic illness. Angela gasped. Then how? Samuel finished the sentence. Someone wanted everyone to believe he died naturally. The room fell silent. Samuel opened another envelope. I interviewed one nurse before the investigation was shut down. He unfolded a handwritten statement. Michael began reading aloud. The patient repeatedly told me he believed someone was poisoning him. Michael stopped. His hands trembled. What? Samuel nodded slowly. He told the nurse his tea tasted bitter. He became violently ill shortly afterward. Angela whispered, Oh my God. Michael stared at the paper. His father hadn't imagined it. Someone had wanted him dead. Samuel reached for the final folder. There's one more thing. Inside was a photograph taken 24 years earlier. It showed Winston Clark standing beside a much younger David. Both men were smiling. Michael frowned. My brother was barely 20. Samuel nodded. They'd been working together much longer than anyone realized. Angela looked closely at the picture. Wait. She pointed toward the background. Standing behind them was another man. Samuel smiled grimly. I was wondering when one of you would notice. Michael looked harder. Then his eyes widened. The bank manager. The same one who handled my wire transfers. Samuel nodded. They'd been working together for decades. Meanwhile, across Kingston, David stormed into his luxury office. He slammed the door hard enough to shake the walls. Attorney Winston Clark looked up calmly. You failed. David threw his car keys onto the desk. He escaped. Clark remained unusually calm. Did he find it? David hesitated. I don't know. The metal box was open. For the first time in years. The lawyer looked genuinely worried. He stood immediately. We're out of time. David frowned. What do you mean? Clark walked toward the window. If Michael has the letter, everything we've built is finished. David stared. What are you talking about? The lawyer slowly turned around. There are things your father knew that you never did. David's voice grew impatient. Then tell me. Clark shook his head. Not yet. Before he could say another word, his phone rang. He answered. His face turned white. No. That's impossible. He slowly lowered the phone. David stepped closer. What happened? The lawyer swallowed hard. The judge has approved the reopening of your father's estate. David's confidence disappeared instantly. What? Clark nodded. And whoever requested it used Michael Brown's full legal signature. David's eyes widened. For 25 years, he had believed his older brother would never return. Now he understood. Michael wasn't just back in Jamaica. He was fighting back. That same evening, Michael parked quietly outside his mother's little blue house. The lights inside were still on. He could hear her singing an old church hymn as she washed dishes. The melody was the same one she had sung when he was a child. He walked closer to the open window. Inside, she knelt beside her bed. Her Bible rested in her hands. She closed her eyes and prayed. Lord, if my Michael is still alive, please bring him home. I don't need money. I don't need a big house. I only want to hug my son one more time before I leave this earth. Tears streamed down Michael's face. He reached toward the door. His hand rested on the handle. The Range Rover scraped a stone wall. Michael disappeared into downtown Kingston. Relieved, Michael slowed near an intersection. Then, crash. A pickup truck slammed into the side of his taxi. The impact sent the old car spinning. Glass shattered. The taxi struck a utility pole. For several terrifying seconds, everything went black. Michael slowly opened his eyes. His head throbbed. Blood trickled down his forehead. People rushed toward the wreck. Someone shouted, "Call an ambulance." Another voice said, "He's still breathing." Michael reached instinctively into his shirt. The recorder. Still there. He smiled weakly. The evidence had survived. Then he noticed something strange. The pickup truck that hit him hadn't stopped. It sped away immediately. Samuel's warning echoed in his mind. Be careful. This hadn't been an accident. Someone had tried to kill him. Hours later, Michael regained consciousness in a small hospital room. Angela sat beside his bed. Her eyes were red from crying. Samuel stood near the window speaking quietly with a police officer. Michael whispered, "The recording." Angela smiled through tears. "It's safe." Samuel walked over. "I've already made 3 copies. One with the police, one with the court, and one somewhere no one will ever find." Michael nodded weakly. "Good." The detective looked unusually serious. "I have news." Michael waited. "The pickup truck that hit you was registered to Brown Heritage Properties, David's company." There was no longer any doubt. It wasn't reckless driving. It was attempted murder. Just then the hospital room door opened. An elderly woman entered carrying a faded envelope. She looked nervous. "Excuse me. I'm looking for Michael Brown." Michael frowned. "I am Michael." She smiled sadly. "I worked as your father's housekeeper. My name is Miss Evelyn. I've carried this for 25 years. She handed him the envelope. "It's from your father. He gave it to me the day before he died. He said, only give this to Michael if something terrible happens." Michael carefully opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it were 6 handwritten words. "Trust no one except your mother." Beneath those words was a list of bank account numbers, property titles, and the names of everyone involved, including David Brown, attorney Winston Clark, the bank manager, a judge, and 2 government officials. Michael looked up slowly. His father hadn't merely suspected corruption. He had documented it. Every name, every account, every secret. For 25 years the truth had been waiting. Now, it was finally time for the world to hear it. 3 weeks later, the Supreme Court of Jamaica was packed long before the hearing began. Journalists lined the hallway. Television cameras waited outside. Whispers echoed through the courtroom. No one knew exactly why the decades-old Brown family estate case had suddenly been reopened. But everyone knew one thing. Something big was about to happen. At the front of the courtroom sat David Brown. His tailored navy blue suit was immaculate, but his confidence had begun to crack. Beside him sat attorney Winston Clark, his face pale, his briefcase filled with legal documents he prayed would still protect them. Across the room sat Gloria Brown. She wore her best church dress, the same blue hat she wore every Easter, and held her worn Bible tightly against her chest. She had no idea why she had been asked to attend. She only knew someone had promised her that today, the truth would finally come out. The courtroom doors opened. A quiet man wearing faded jeans, a khaki shirt, and a baseball cap walked inside. David glanced up. His jaw tightened. The taxi driver? The man walked calmly to the witness stand. The judge adjusted his glasses. State your name for the record. The man reached up slowly. He removed the baseball cap. Then he took off the fake gray beard he had worn for weeks. The courtroom fell silent. He looked directly at the judge. My name is Michael Anthony Brown. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then gasps echoed through the courtroom. A reporter dropped her notebook. Someone in the gallery whispered, "It can't be." David's face turned white. His mouth opened but no words came. Gloria stared at the man before her. Tears filled her eyes. She stood slowly. My Michael?" Michael turned toward her. His voice trembled. "Hello, Mama." She cried out his name. Michael. Ignoring courtroom protocol, she rushed across the room. Michael met her halfway. Mother and son embraced for the first time in 25 years. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. The courtroom watched in complete silence as years of pain dissolved into tears. Even the judge quietly removed his glasses. When everyone returned to their seats, Michael stood before the court. He placed a worn metal box on the evidence table. This belonged to my father. Inside were his father's handwritten letters, original property deeds, bank account records, copies of wire transfers, the audio recording from the marina, the notebook Detective Samuel Grant had preserved for 25 years. One by one, each document was entered into evidence. Then the recording was played. David's own voice filled the courtroom. Every month, like clockwork. She'll never know what she signed. I almost felt sorry for him. The room was silent. Then Winston Clark's voice followed. If that letter reaches a courtroom, we're finished. The judge pressed the stop button. He looked over his glasses. Mr. Brown, do you deny these statements? David stared at the table. For the first time in his life, he had no answer. The last secret. Michael looked toward his brother. There is one more truth. The courtroom became still. Michael unfolded his father's final letter. My father asked me to read this aloud only if our family was ever divided. He began reading. David is not my biological son. David looked up sharply. What? Michael continued. Your mother and I adopted him after his parents died. We never wanted him to feel different. He became our son in every way that mattered. The courtroom watched David in stunned silence. He shook his head. No. That's impossible. Gloria slowly stood. Tears streamed down her face. It's true. David looked at her. You knew. She nodded. Your father wanted to tell you when you were older. But then he became sick. I begged him to wait. David staggered backward. My whole life was a lie. Gloria walked toward him. No. You were loved every single day. You were never less than my son. David's knees gave way. He sat heavily in his chair, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, the proud businessman disappeared. In his place sat a frightened little boy searching for answers. David buried his face in his hands. I was 12, he whispered. Winston Clark told me that Dad loved Michael more. Michael frowned. David continued. He said everything would belong to you. He told me I'd always be second. Clark jumped to his feet. He's lying. David turned toward him. No. You lied. For 25 years. You poisoned me against my own family. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Order. David looked at Michael. I'm sorry. I believed him. I let jealousy become hatred. I stole from the only family that ever loved me. Tears rolled freely down his face. I don't expect forgiveness. Michael remained silent for several long moments. Then he walked toward his younger brother. The courtroom held its breath. Michael extended his hand. David stared at it. You made terrible choices, Michael said. But those choices don't erase the little boy who shared my bedroom. Or climbed mango trees with me. Or cried when Dad taught us how to ride bicycles. David broke down completely. Instead of shaking his hand, he embraced his brother. The courtroom burst into applause. The judge spoke firmly. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, all properties, bank accounts, and assets obtained through fraud are hereby returned to the Brown family estate. He continued. Attorney Winston Clark is disbarred immediately and referred for criminal prosecution. The court also orders investigations into all individuals named in the financial records. Police officers approached Clark. For the first time in decades, the powerful lawyer looked afraid. As he was escorted from the courtroom, he glanced back at Michael. Michael simply held his father's pocket watch. Justice had finally arrived. The old blue house was empty. Not because Gloria had passed away, but because she no longer lived there. Michael had restored the original family home on the farm. The mango tree still stood proudly in the yard. Children played beneath its branches. The land had become the Brown Family Community Foundation, offering scholarships, farming grants, and small business loans to hardworking Jamaicans. Angela's bakery had expanded into 3 successful locations. A sign on the wall proudly read, "Dream big. Stay humble." Detective Samuel Grant received a national award for his unwavering commitment to justice. He smiled when he accepted it. "Sometimes the truth takes time," he said. "But the truth always finds its way home." Where are they now? Michael Brown divided his time between Jamaica and the United States. Though still a billionaire, he preferred driving through his old neighborhood in a simple pickup truck, stopping to greet neighbors and mentor young entrepreneurs. His greatest investment was no longer in companies, it was in people. Gloria Brown spent her mornings tending a vegetable garden beside the restored farmhouse. Every Sunday the family gathered for dinner, just as they had dreamed of years before. She often said, "God answered my prayer, just not on my timetable." David Brown accepted responsibility for his crimes. After cooperating with investigators and helping recover stolen assets, he served his sentence. Upon his release, he chose a quiet life, working with the Brown Family Community Foundation to help young people avoid the mistakes he had made. Rebuilding trust took years, but he never stopped trying. Angela Campbell continued baking the coconut bread and rum cake that had made her bakery famous. She and Michael remained close friends, united by a shared belief that kindness, even in childhood, can shape a lifetime. The moral of the story: wealth can build houses, but only love builds a home. Jealousy can steal money, but it can never steal the truth forever. Forgiveness does not erase the past. It gives the future a chance. And sometimes, the richest person in the room is the one who never forgot where they came from. Now it's your turn. What would you have done if you were in Michael's shoes? Do you think he made the right decision by forgiving David? Would you forgive a family member after 25 years of betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one of them and I'd love to hear your perspective. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves powerful Jamaican stories of family, faith, forgiveness, and second chances. Until next time, remember, no matter how far life takes you, never forget your roots, because sometimes the road home leads to the greatest treasure of all.